Legend says that Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back and every day wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And Tara Reade came out to say the man they tried to label the messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer. And knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US printed walking papers. And knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character. That his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation. So if you really think there's something to be gained out of sharing your pain with the world, you are sorely mistaken. The Biden team just dragged their feet addressing Tara's allegations. Until they had a decent list of smears, then they aired them out on every station. And it turns out no one wants to hear the truth of who they praised as being worthy of such bloated liberal celebration. That no one wants to really know the person they've so valiantly defended, even when it meant they had to gloat and shit all over someone braver than they'd be if given the occasion. Now cue the faceless comment squad invasion. Cue those fuckers crawling out the woodwork to come analyze the way you wore your hair and what you wear. Like your appearance waives your rights, or that somehow you're the reason for your situation. Somehow they've decided you should bear responsibility for what such monstrous men insist on doing. Somehow they're deluded by the empty, hypocritical, and useless fucking platitudes that bastard keeps on spewing. And I think it's very telling that the best of their excuses when they try to come and justify our president's abuses is a hearty butt Trump. In which case I'll remind you that you never saw the news attempt to sell us Donald Trump like he was morally upstanding or a decent human. But when Joe says something bigoted or ogles someone's little kid, CNN says, isn't this refreshing? Biden's like a mix of JFK and FDR with all the finer parts of Harry Truman. Christ, I know that they don't think that we're the brightest, but at least pretend we got a couple lumens. Ask yourself if you have ever questioned what they fed you, or do you just shut your eyes and then consume it? And now ask yourself if you ate every one of Biden's lies under guise of harm reduction and the promise of a slight improvement. And now imagine long ago that Biden chose to show you who he really was by traumatizing you for his amusement. Now imagine that you watched him touch a Bible with those filthy hands, and then assume the power of the highest seat in all the land, of knowing your attacker wields a global coalition born of three-letter agencies.
Survival, and I have someone really fun sitting right here with me right now, Fiorella Isabel, RT presenter, journalist, and podcast host of the Convo Couch. Welcome, Fee.
Hi.
And my future roommate.
Hi.
We're together. Where are we?
We're in Moscow.
Moscow, Russia.
Yes.
Ruskies. So we decided that for this stream, we're going to start out a little light, and then we'll get into like the horrible things that are happening in the world. But we thought we would start some light stuff. First of all, well, I set up a green room for Fee because she's kind of, she's a presenter. She's a big deal at RT, that's cool. So I set up a little green room. I think she liked it.
Mm-hmm.
Had a little sparkling wine. Did you like it?
It's very nice. I appreciate it.
We're doing this stream of fam at a different time because she had to do her nails. Let's show the nails. Yeah, come on.
I want to AOC this thing.
No, I mean, I got to do my nails, but she's did some beautiful nails. Okay. So one of the things about Russia is that
Mhm.
when you get to have delivery and order stuff online. And so I've been learning how to order things kind of.
Mhm.
And so I was going to show this mystery bag because it's stuff that I actually ordered, but I don't know what it is.
Mhm.
So I wanted coffee fee.
Mhm.
So I got this. And I don't have that machine.
No,
Yes.
it's for an espresso machine.
Right, espresso
Yes,
machine.
I-
Okay.
I know who has this machine.
Oh, well, give it to them.
Okay.
Okay, you have someone
Yeah.
in mind? Okay.
Yeah.
You know somebody with an espresso machine, they would like love it. So they got some free things. This, I have no idea what I ordered. Anyone speaks Russian?
Okay.
It's cold.
I think it's some sort of ice
What
cream.
is it? What is it?
It's
It's an ice cream?
Yes, this is ice
But
cream.
like, but oh my God, that's like the biggest ice cream sandwich I've ever
No,
seen.
they do things a little bit different here.
Okay, what is
It
that? An
comes
ice
in
cream
like a-
sandwich?
No, it's like ice cream, like
Ice
actual
cream.
ice cream in like a package like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, instead of a bucket, it's like, this is, okay, so I ordered ice cream and I didn't know that I did. It looks interesting and we'll taste test that later.
You probably want to put that in.
I
the
want to
freezer.
put that in the freezer. So
Yeah.
we'll do that in a moment. We'll put that in the freezer in a moment. So thank you, Fee, for
Okay.
leading me through that. Now, does that happen to you or no?
No. Take the translator app and I translate it. And I have a handy Russian friend to help me as well. So
Oh, the handy Russian friend.
yeah. So
Do tell.
no, that
No.
I have several Russian
It's
friends.
had
you know?
several Russian friends. All right. No telling about the Russian.
Mm-mm.
friend. All right.
Yeah.
Couldn't get it out of her.
No.
Couldn't get it out of her, fam.
No, fams, I'm sorry.
All right. We have some questions in the chat, don't we, Reade? Already. Wow,
Thank you
we
guys.
love that.
Appreciate it.
Fee is beautiful, resplendent. What can you say? Yeah, that was great to have her. Okay, so we're going to talk about serious stuff now.
Mhm.
So Reef, can you first pull up the latest that Biden did that's got everyone going on the internet? Yeah, say that for Fee. Have you seen?
Yeah,
Okay.
but let's walk together.
Can you play the video? No, that's not that article, Reef, the one about Finland, the little girl, the one that everyone, yeah.
Oh, okay. Because that one, I think this one.
This one. Play that for fam. Biden did this. He's nibbling the girl. She's rejecting it. Rejecting it.
Scared.
And then he still goes in for a kiss.
And
She
they're
turns
still taking
away.
a picture of it.
Yeah.
This is just
No
fun.
boundaries. What do you think?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
I think this is what he does all the time. And he just thinks it's normal.
Mhm.
And it's not normal.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. And of course, the media the independent media and the Republican media are having a field day with this.
Mhm.
I've seen it nonstop
Mhm.
all over the place. It just doesn't help his case whatsoever. And neither does Kamala Harris every time she opens her mouth.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's not looking good.
Very non sequitur when she speaks.
She just says a bunch of words together and that's it.
Yeah, but there's not like a meaning
And she's
behind
like
them.
on drugs.
Yeah,
So
I know.
I don't want to, say that for sure, but it would appear that she's on some sort of medication.
Something that makes her very happy.
Yeah,
She always seems very happy.
very happy, but
Yeah.
in a very manic way. And
Oh, that's a good word. Yeah, that does
That's
seem like
like
that.
our-
Yeah,
our
like
leadership.
hysterical laughing.
our leadership in the
Mhm. Mhm.
White House right now. So it's very
Okay.
exciting times.
Exciting times. And then, of
Mhm.
course, last week was the White House cocaine, and they just came out yesterday and said they couldn't provide a suspect. They just couldn't
No.
imagine.
They have no idea who could do it.
I mean, no idea. I
But-
know it's a mystery.
But the betting industry said it was likely Hunter Biden, followed by a random tourist, followed by Angelina Jolie.
Angelina Jolie.
Yeah, it was Angelina Jolie had high. I don't know why.
Okay.
I wouldn't
okay.
have
All
thought
right.
of
all right.
her at this point in her
No,
life.
no,
Maybe
no,
when she
no.
was younger.
Maybe
but
younger.
Not
No,
now.
she's a mom and stuff. No.
Yeah.
no, but I don't know. I guess moms do coke. I don't
Yeah.
know. Whatever. Well, that's interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so moving forward, meanwhile, while a lot of partying is happening at the White House and weird stuff happening outside the White House, because of the Biden regime, some really serious yucky stuff is happening too. So Reef, could you throw up that article? I wanted for you to see it, about the reservists. So, you know, what struck me was this came, and we had a conversation last night, and then right after, I think, or the next morning, this happened, where now Biden made a statement at the Nordic thing saying that Putin has lost Ukraine, he lost the war, and then he announces he's sending troops without congressional approval. I mean, what's your thought on this?
Well, the AUMF, right, gives him that power. He doesn't need congressional approval. This is something that we've been talking about for a long time, Pasta and I. This is something that we knew it was going to come back and bite everybody in the arse. And it's not surprising because we already have troops via NATO stationed there. There are a lot of witnesses that have heard, especially in Donbass, people speaking English, soldiers speaking English, and so on and so forth. So there's definitely Brits and Americans and all of that. So this just signifies a more obvious situation where they're sending now more direct soldiers. I do see it as more of an escalation, but at the end of the day, Russia knows this is nothing new. They know that they're NATO, and the US is leading NATO, is really trying to do everything they can to prolong this conflict, even though they know Ukraine cannot win this conflict. And that's becoming more clear every day. And the reality is they're doing this because they have zero desire to actually help Ukrainians. This is just, you know, using Ukraine as a proxy. And I think the NATO summit really showed that Ukraine is exactly that, you know, Zelensky and all the memes we saw, he's literally just being weaponized by the elite class, and he thinks he's one of them, but really he isn't. He's just an actor, a clown of sort of entertainment that they're using. And it's really sad almost in a way, but he knows what he got himself into. What's sad is the people that are dying as a result of this continued, both Ukrainians and Russians. And, you know, again, like I've said this as much, I've never met a single Russian that has, you know, wished horrible things on Ukrainians. You know, like they'll tell you their experiences, and under like the people who've lived in Donbass, they'll say this is terrible and this is what Ukraine did to us, but they won't be this evil sort of person that the West has created us to believe.
Yeah, I mean, for 9 years, the Kiev regime has been bombing the Donbass region and the people. I mean, imagine living somewhere and being bombed by your own government and being, you know, how frightening that is, you know, and how horrible. And do you feel like the narrative is being lost? Like, do you think that the Western NATO narrative is still being held on to, or do you think NATO is slipping? And do you think they're losing? In other words, is there a possibility that we could actually abolish NATO? Is it a possibility, or is it out of reach?
I think that the only people that could abolish NATO are the American people, and meaning American, US American people, because we are exporting the hegemony, right? Our country has exported this hegemony. We are responsible, our country, our government is responsible for the killings, for the regime changes, for these coups, for these interventionist policies that have killed millions of people in Afghanistan and Iraq, combined with the total years and years that we've done. And so at a certain point, this is a discussion I've had with people. I do feel like it falls on the shoulders of the American public, because if somebody comes from outside and intervenes with us, you know, you're an American, so it's going to put you in that situation. And nobody wants to invade a nuclear power like the United States. So it's going to take the American people to actually do something about this. But I feel like the American people aren't there yet, because they're still stuck in playing pretend with these elections. And I'm not supporting anyone in these elections, because I could from abroad, I absolutely could, but we're beyond that point in the United States. And so that I think Americans are still stuck in this idea that if they vote, they'll somehow change something. And it's just past that point. And they really have to figure out ways to move things without the electoral system. And that's the only way you could abolish NATO. It's really easy to say abolish NATO, we need to get rid of NATO, but to put the actual organizing and actual movement building outside of the electorate is a lot harder. And it's been done before in terms of creating new parties, in terms of taking over the government. But this is something that I think it's going to take some time and more direct Americans to be directly affected, because you see Europeans protest because they're directly affected. We have mostly escaped that, except now, like we've seen the inflation, but Europe is far more dependent on that, on this Russian energy. So they were able to feel it more. They've been out in the streets, and it's more of their culture as well. We're a lot more comfortable and we are a lot more protected from everything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, I agree with you 100% as far as not voting. I mean, I'm here in Moscow and, you know, like in 2020, I didn't vote. Fee, I don't know if you knew that, but like, I'm an independent now. Obviously I'm not a Democrat anymore, but I felt like you did, that there was no integrity to the elections, but we're not allowed to say that. And when you say that out loud on YouTube, they take down your whole video and whatever. But the truth of the matter is, I think it's really meaningful to question the electorate. That's part of democracy, is to question the integrity. And I've heard you and Pasta have that long discussion about that. I wanted to ask you about Nicaragua and what's going on. The latest news. Have you seen the latest news about that? Oh, okay. Never mind then. It's kind of breaking news, but they were having some issues there with their electoral process, and Claire Daly made a really good speech about it. And again, it's going to, America was meddling again. The Western powers are meddling again. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. What is your thoughts on that, about the West kind of meddling in the elections in Central and South America?
Well, in the United States has meddled in Central America for a long time. They established a base in Honduras. They have a NATO partner in Colombia. They have all kinds of NGOs all over Latin America. But Central America, Nicaragua represents a country that has resisted US hegemony. They are celebrating their independence from the revolution, the Sandinistas revolution, actually very soon. Pasta and I will be going to that. And so they have really withstood the interference by the West, which is why you see constantly the United States sanctioning them, the United States throwing these fake stories about them being against Catholic priests, about them, you know, being not having fair elections. We were debunking that their elections were unfair on live. Myself, Pasta, Wyatt, and a bunch of other journalists that were there. And the New York Times was flat out lying. They weren't even there to document anything. But any country that resists, and especially the smaller countries that are able to, in spite of these sanctions, survive. And one of the things about Nicaragua is that they have food sovereignty, which is extremely important. It means that they're self-reliable when it comes to food, that they don't have to import all this stuff. And we're not even food sovereign in the United States. No. And so that's a very important factor. So they've been able to go through that, but it's still very hard because these sanctions, as you know, affect people. It's an active siege war. You can't really use certain money. These countries are put in a stranglehold so that people will turn against their government. And we've seen this work. We've seen it work when it comes to immigration, when it comes to Venezuela, when it comes to Cuba. And these are countries that I've been to. And it's the same story all around. They try to convince the people that it's their government that's doing it, when it's really the US blockade, the US sanctions. And so that is what they do. And that's what they tried to do to Russia. But the one thing is, Russia is not Syria. It is not Nicaragua. It is not Cuba. It is not Venezuela. It is a nuclear power. It is a country that has more industry. And they have been able to withstand US hegemony coming from even the Soviet Union. And I think the United States thought that with the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia would fall apart, and that didn't happen. And so what we're seeing now is a continuation of the existence of NATO was to really counter the Soviet Union. It was under the banner of communism then. Russia's not communist anymore, but the reality is they're still trying to take that down. And so we're still sort of repeating these same cycles, I think.
Yeah, good.
And it's, you have German tanks in being sent around Europe. This is like, if history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes, right? So it's either way, we're seeing these cycles repeat.
It's interesting because Dmitry Polyansky just made an interesting statement about that. He said he was stating that regarding the new Cold War, this is not the new Cold War. He said, this isn't it. He said, this is different. What's happening right now is a multipolar world, and Western hegemony is it's falling apart. And so we're moving from a unipolar world to a multipolar world. He's referring to, I assume, China, and he's referring to some of the alliances being made economically right now, and the de-dollarization. And of course, in that whole mix, you have the movement towards many countries towards crypto and towards Bitcoin and towards an electronic currency that's decentralized. And the United States doesn't like that, right?
Right.
They've gone after anybody who's involved with crypto. Right. But there are countries who already kind of adopted that. So could you talk a little bit about some of the countries that you know of that did that in Central America and South?
Well, they have, so what are called remittances? Like, for example, if I'm somebody that lives in Honduras, my family that lives in the United States can send me money, but through Western Union, and it costs a lot of money to send your money. Right. Like they charge you an arm and a leg. So what some people have done to navigate these sanctions are to circumvent these sanctions are basically use crypto in certain places in Asia and certain places in Latin America. It's not as popular as it could be, but it's getting more momentum, particularly in El Salvador. You're seeing that now. El Salvador has a very controversial president. He is definitely not a favorite of the establishment of the United States, but he's also not a favorite of the anti-imperialist left. There's a lot of controversy because he has undone a lot of social programs, a lot of social safety nets for the country, but he's still not a favorite of the IMF. So he kind of comes across like a libertarian of sorts. And he has been pushing cryptocurrency a lot through the use of energy of this volcano that El Salvador has. So it's and his name is Bukele, and he's a younger guy, and he's definitely much more innovative and different. So it's kind of like he's got a lot of people that don't like him all over the place. He's kind of somebody I would describe as hard to pin down, but I definitely have my issues with him, but I also think he doesn't always do what the establishment wants him to do. So he's kind of like one of those ones to watch. Now, in terms of the Bitcoin stuff, what the United States is trying to do is to control cryptocurrencies, to put them in a centralized form through digitalization of all our money, right? So we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution here. We're talking about all of that, but there's a difference between different cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is a decentralized cryptocurrency. So it doesn't operate through the central bank. You can't, it would be very hard to control it, which is why the United States has done everything they can to give it a negative spin. And it's not the most reliable right now because of everything they've been doing. Now, the other thing that's happening, I don't know if you heard about this, is the Russian ruble is going to be made into a digital form.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
So a lot of people,
but decentralized, correct?
Right. So
decentralized.
It's not going to have anything to do with the
centralized banking,
IMF centralized banking system. The ruble, and Putin just spoke at the technology forum in Moscow yesterday. I'm losing track. I think it was yesterday. And he basically said that the whole point of them doing that was to keep up with technology, but also have this word again, technological sovereignty, meaning not be dependent on other countries' technology or fall behind the advancement. And this is something I've been talking to several of my journalist friends about. There is a sector of people that think that everything that Russia isn't really opposing anything, China isn't really opposing anything, that they're all just gonna, come in and they're all gonna be a part of this fourth industrial revolution, and they're all gonna sell the people out, and it's all the same. I disagree with that point of view. And I've had multiple discussions about why I disagree with that point of view with people who know a lot more about China than I do. And people like Matt Ehret, he's explained it very well, and his partner Cynthia, they really go into depth as to why they see like there is opposition in Russia and China against the West, and I 100% agree with that. And here's the thing, I don't see Russia using this technology against its own people, because everything they're doing right now is the diametrical opposite of that. In the United States, what have we experienced? We have experienced decline. Right. And it's a completely different situation. And also the decentralized factor. This is more about getting Russia to compete in the multipolar world rather than getting Russia to be isolated. And I'm of the belief, like, unless we go back to where we're literally farming and we have no technology and we all live off the land, which some people want to do. And I think that you should you should grow your own food. I think you should, find avenues to have land, to do all that, because I do think that's important. But unless everybody does that, which is not feasible, then these countries are not, they would lose if they succumb to say, well, we're just not going to embrace technology, because we can't compete with technology. Things are going to advance whether we like it or not, unless we literally bomb the world to pieces and destroy everything. So this idea that we, that these countries, because they're embracing some sort of digital format like China or Russia, are already selling everybody out is a very, I would say, reductionist, myopic point of view, because it really depends on the type of government you have and how it's working. Right. And I think that perspective comes from people who have a more anarchist perspective, where all governments are bad. And I get that perspective, but it's just not true, because I've seen governments that work for people, at least to a certain degree, that have every intention. I've seen governments in Nicaragua that do that, and they allow these anarchist communities that we went to in Billweed to exist, and they don't interfere unless they're asked. So there are governments that actually are not bad. And I think this idea comes from the Western centric perspective that our governments have been shitty. So we automatically assume that everybody is
kind of like trauma, it's just like trauma. Like you can't believe anyone's going to be kind after you've been treated so badly. Right. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure that, hey, Reef, we heard, since you're there, you have a couple questions for Fee? Yeah, let's throw it up. Because I wanted her to hear that. That'd be great. Okay.
2 weeks ago, there was an election in Guatemala. Yes. The government had been shutting down newspapers, forcing judges into exile. Our own EU observation mission documented that opposition parties were arbitrarily blocked, bogus legal challenges from registering candidates, limiting the field. Despite all of that, the people went to the polls, and shock horror, they made sure that a social democrat got to the second round. So what happened? The old parties run to the Supreme Court, shout about anomalies they didn't happen to see on election day. This is a blatant derailment of an electoral process in a country with a long and bloody history of same. Why isn't it on our agenda? Do the Guatemalans matter less than the Venezuelans? Or is the real agenda here, as in Venezuela, protecting old money and vested interests? I condemn the attacks on Guatemalan democracy. The next round on August 20th better proceed.
Yeah, so let me just, because Guatemala is absolutely what was going down. So we were watching this election and we wanted to go, but the whole process has been tainted because they're not allowing the people who should run to run. Okay. And like she said, there's this they've attempted to discount the actual process of the election by saying that there is interference, and they did the same thing to Nicaragua. And this is something that happens in all countries in Latin America, but Guatemala has a strong, it's been pretty much downtrodden. It's been pretty much a country that has been really just in a dire economic and political situation for a long time. And any sort of attempt to get rid of that by the people has been squashed by intervention. And a lot of people that I was talking to were saying that this was there was outside interference, and it just wasn't even an election that we could even go and observe, because they were not even making that possible. It was one of those things that is really hard, and Pasta really wanted to go actually to Guatemala.
Yeah.
So I'm with Claire on this. I mean, it's really just, it's just so common, and we see it time and time again. And they don't want Guatemala. They can't let go of Guatemala because Honduras has already has a government that is, was walking a fine line. But the wife of Manuel Zelaya, who the U.S. couped in 2009 under the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton under the Obama administration, became president, Xiomara, and she has been open to the one China policy. They severed their relationship with Taiwan that they had for decades, and they went into the one China policy. They're trying to do business in a multipolar type of style, in spite of the fact that they're not a radical government like Nicaragua. They're more of a socially democratic type of government, but they're still not doing what the U.S. wants. So the U.S. doesn't have Honduras. The U.S. doesn't have Nicaragua. The U.S. has a lot of trouble with Mexico. So right now they need to keep Nicaragua. They need to keep they need to keep certain countries in Latin America. They need to keep Chile. They need to keep Paraguay, Uruguay, and
what about Argentina?
Argentina, there was lawfare against Cristina Kirchner there. So she is not able to run in this election in October. So that's a whole other thing as well. So the lawfare thing is what I went to Venezuela to discuss.
Right.
So yeah.
Oh, how did that trip go, by the way? And tell us a little bit about your trip to Venezuela and then the US.
Right. So my trip to Venezuela came first. I went to Venezuela, and it was phenomenal to be at a country that, again, it's one of those countries that the people are so strong and so resilient. And this is something I've noticed in every country I've been to that's been under the boot of the US empire. People are resilient, people are innovative, and the people that remain there are people that really love their country and sacrifice a lot, because Venezuela has gone through hardship after hardship after hardship at different points in history. When Hugo Chavez was president, I remember I was very young, I was a child, and I remember everybody just painting him as a dictator, that he was evil. And that's just what I grew up hearing. And I realized that he wasn't that pretty early on. And, that is Venezuela is one of the countries that if you go back to history through Simón Bolívar was the liberator of Latin America. He wanted to create a unified Latin America. And he was basically stopped by somebody that was his former friend. And he basically wasn't able to fully create what we're all trying to do here, is in a cooperation between Latin American countries, Latin American countries that have their own currency, that can trade and can become self-sufficient for national sovereignty. And he was betrayed by one of the men in his army called Santander, who was established in Colombia. And so from that moment on, this is why Venezuela had the money Bolivar, because they came from Bolivar. He was born in Venezuela. He was the leader that signified actual democracy and the ideas of enlightenment. He went to Europe and studied and came back with all of these ideas. And so from that time on, Venezuela was looked on as the more radical revolutionary country. And so being there and having that entire history that I saw like a theatrical sort of display of Bolivar and what was going on and what went about in establishing this new type of America, independence from Spain and all of that. And I also got to go to, mainly what I went to go to do was talk about the case of Alex Saab.
Oh, yes.
And Alex Saab is a Venezuelan diplomat. He was made a diplomat under Nicolas Maduro, and the United States decided to arrest him. They arrested him under the presidency of Donald Trump, and they arrested him under the presidency of Joe Biden. He is in jail right now because he was finally taken into custody, and he's been in jail for a few years now, and he has children, and he has a wife, and you're not supposed to jail a diplomat and arrest a diplomat.
No, I thought they had diplomatic immunity.
They absolutely do.
Walk me through this. So he's an American citizen.
No.
No, he's a Venezuelan citizen.
Mhm.
No dual citizenship.
So
No, what's
it
his
has nothing
connection?
to do with the United States.
So then how did they, what's the
it's a
legal overreach?
it's a political case. It's not, it's a political persecution case.
So another overreach where someone from another country, the US goes in and says, we're going to grab them because we don't like them.
Right. So he was a diplomat, right? So because the United States at the time, this is their argument, they did not recognize Nicolas Maduro as the president because they recognized Juan Guaido as president.
Oh, that's right.
They decided that he didn't have diplomatic immunity. So the United States can decide who of which country has diplomatic immunity because they can decide who is president of a country they don't like. Right. So that's essentially what they're saying. So the lawfare comes in where they're weaponizing that to say that he didn't have diplomatic immunity, and that so they were able to persecute and prosecute him. And he has cancer, and he's not getting the medical treatment he needs, and he is very sick. And this is a case of political persecution. They're trying to say that he broke the law. He didn't break, that he's corrupt. So they're throwing everything at him with no evidence that he. But really, what he did that pissed them off was during the time that Venezuela was mostly suffering from sanctions, he went and negotiated oil and food, and especially more than anything, medical supplies with Iran. And there was a ship that was bribed by the United States, and they offered millions of dollars to the captains of these multiple ships that were coming into Venezuela to not dock, to turn around and go, and they didn't. And they went on and they brought more than anything medical supplies, and the United States did not like that at all. And especially because it was Iran and Venezuela, and they saw it as an act of defiance around their sanctions that they had imposed, and he was arrested. And so this is a political persecution case. They can talk about how corrupt he is and this and that. They're going to continue doing that. But to Venezuelans, he's looked on as a hero. Right. As somebody that fought for Venezuela. And he's looked at as somebody that really is a Venezuelan patriot. And so this is why they're trying so hard through the Free Alex Saab movement to free him. And the Free Alex Saab movement is trying to pick up steam. And when I spoke at the Free Alex Saab event, I mentioned Julian Assange and the political persecution that was happening with him, because another person that's an Australian citizen has nothing to do with the United States. But of course, this whole extradition case is about that. It's not about him being a whistleblower. He's not a whistleblower. He's a publisher and a journalist. It's about him exposing Western hegemony and defying it. They don't like this defiance. And that's what they're going after Julian Assange for. So again, time and time again, we're seeing cases, whether it's a politician, whether it's a diplomat, an activist, or journalist, the cases where the United States is going after people for defying them in their belief and for having a different opinion on the narrative spin that we're seeing. I don't know if you saw the AP article that I posted. This is like, they're saying that Russia is putting people in prisons, Ukrainians in prison, and they're making them dig graves. I kid you not.
What?
The AP.
What?
The AP said this.
Oh my goodness. So propaganda is king. But you and I know a little bit about what it means to have a different opinion than the US State Department. At least I do, for sure. And I know you do. So tell me a little bit about, or tell us, the fam, a little bit about what happened in the United States and what your impressions were. Because, you know, you've been going back and forth now. How long have you been in Moscow? A year? Has it been a year?
It's been over a year now.
Over a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, actually over a year. And it's just wonderful here. You know, it's wonderful.
I know it's wonderful.
I've been trying to find a right time to do like a live stream where I'm just walking around like, you know, Arba and stuff. Because I think that'd be a great stream, but sometimes the internet cuts out. So that's why I'm like, I gotta make sure I have good internet. But when I was back in the United States, guys, like I didn't really make a fanfare out of going back to the United States because I'm kind of like freaked out because the last time I was back for like 24 hours, they detained me and questioned me for 2 hours. And it was like, you know, you go into a room with no windows and they're like, and the guy is playing good cop. He's being really nice. He's, you know, I mean, who knows what he really actually believes, but he was, you know, questioning me and he wasn't mean and I wasn't rude, which in my younger years, I may have been. But I have since become a little bit more diplomatic.
And you're not salty when you deal with
no. Okay. And I mean, that's the thing. Like I'm working as a journalist, so I can't, you know, really like, I'm not going to go there and say all of my opinions because I think that's a mistake. And I think that was happening with some of the people that visited Cuba. Pasta told me they went in there very angry and it just makes it harder. Like there's a time to protest and you guys know I will protest and I will get arrested like on camera and all of this stuff. But you know, when you're there in that room, first of all, it was like after like 2 hours of waiting to get through the immigration line because it was so long. And I was so exhausted from traveling like 20 something hours just to get there so I could go to Cuba. The whole point was for me to go to Cuba. And they didn't even know I was going to Cuba. That's the thing. They didn't even know I was going to Cuba. So it was like, I wasn't going to fight anybody. I was so exhausted and I just wanted to go home. I just wanted to like, I was going to rest one day and then leave the next day. And so I was like, it just ended up taking forever. But it's just like that, you know, the fact that we can be just questioned when I said that I worked in Russia, which I wasn't going to lie about that. You know, that's when I was pulled aside. And that's something that, you know, we have to be wary about as a journalist, because it's not safe anymore. You can't say, oh, I'm a journalist, so I'm okay. Julian Assange case shows you that you're definitely not okay.
No, you're not okay.
And especially, especially if you have a different opinion, a different narrative, if you're working for a company that has is literally putting out the opposite of what the AP is putting out. So there's that. And so I was afraid of coming back, but because I hadn't even come back to spend time with my family in a long time. It was like 9 months or so. So that's kind of why they were freaked out. They were like, you haven't been back in so long and blah, blah, blah. So that's what they said, at least. And so when I went back, it was nice to see my family and a few of my friends, but honestly, guys, I don't think I could do it. I would like to buy like a home and go visit my family and all this stuff. But honestly, like I've said this before I left, I said, I don't want to live in a NATO country. Right. I need to live in a non-NATO country. And after visiting, you know, being in Nicaragua, it was one of my favorite places. Venezuela has the nicest, loveliest people in spite of everything. Cuba is another place that's just magical in spite of everything. And I love Latin America and I have family in Peru. And so there's so many places I would rather be than in the United States, because when I went back there, everything was expensive. It was insane. I went out with my friends to go to a bar and it was $20 per drink in Florida.
For a drink?
For a drink.
Oh my God.
And it was just like, and it wasn't like fancy places. It was just like random places. And you could go to places and you'll find, okay, it wasn't as bad, but I could notice like, and my parents were talking about it. Everything has gone up in price and businesses were shutting down left and right. I mean, there were restaurants, clothing, retail stores, and a bunch of businesses that I knew. My friends were like, oh yes, this one closed, that one closed. And so what you're seeing is like also the retail isn't doing good. And also the housing industry, the gigantic companies are buying out all of these houses and people can't afford them anymore.
Right.
So there's that. You can't afford property anymore. You'll own nothing. And it's just like,
but you'll be happy.
Yeah. But
you're American.
Yeah.
Because you're American.
It was just bad.
American exceptionalism. Well, okay. So it's not the citizens' fault. But
Oh, like an old video?
like an older video? Okay. June 26th. Okay. If you let's hold off for a second because I wanted to finish a thought. But what I was going to say is that I was just going to ask you this quick question. Do you think America, I have my own opinion of this, but I want to hear yours. Do you think America is now a failed state?
I mean, I think so. I hesitated because I had to really think about what the definition of a failed state. I would say it's not at rock bottom, but I would say the reason I think it's a failed state is because it's not providing for the people.
Okay.
And the people are not able to really succeed at this moment. Like the American dream is dead as we know it. You can get lucky and or you can, you know, work in certain industries and be okay, but society as a whole is not functioning the way it should. It's just not. It really, I think it's in a decline like this. I don't think it's like right now like this, but I think it's like this.
Okay.
Whereas Russia started from the bottom
And now it's coming up.
and now it's coming up. Yeah.
Well, okay. All right. Okay. So, Reef, do you want to play that clip? Thank you.
The weaponization of human rights in Nicaragua, this small, poor country 10,000 kilometers away, is really very disgusting as far as I'm concerned. It's very true that the United Nations report on Nicaragua alleges serious human rights violations. The forced deportation of hundreds of people and the stripping of citizenship cannot be ignored. But what the UN wasn't looking at, and what this discussion has left out, is the part played in the conflict by the anti-government forces and the international community. The international community is not a bystander, it's a participant. It has deliberately employed coercion, including sanctions, to intensify divisions in Nicaragua, including pulling society apart, preventing it from developing its own relations with strategic rivals. The issue here is not about what we should do, but what we shouldn't do. Coercive diplomacy makes things worse. We've got to remove the sanctions, stop stoking divisions, and allow peaceful resolution of disputes.
Okay. Your thoughts?
I want to add some context to what she said about, because the accusations about forced deportations and stripping of citizenship, Nicaragua jailed people that were trying to overthrow the government. Nicaragua didn't force anybody. They basically, these people didn't want to be a part of Nicaragua. They wanted to overthrow the government. And so what Nicaragua did is, instead of jailing them, they gave them the opportunity to go where they wanted to, because they were working with the United States Department of State. There was actual money. I myself asked the question, did you guys jail your opposition because you were threatened? And I went and I actually asked this question. There's a video of me. I think my brother filmed it. And I know Camilla from Kaswacha News was also there. And they said, no, we only jailed people who had direct funding from the United States who were trying to overthrow the government. Who established the FARA Act? That was the United States. Yep. Russia has done the same thing. And this is, again, these countries, and this is why Syria canceled the BBC's accreditation. These countries cannot afford to allow these people that come in with money to try to overthrow the government. That is not a deprivation of freedoms or democracy. That is self-protection, self-preservation, because they know that through these NGOs, through this funding, these entities are trying to overthrow the government. This is why Cuba is extremely critical of anything to do like that. And even to get accreditation in Cuba, you have to go through a whole process because they're so afraid of this outside interference, and I can't blame them. And so what Claire's point, I really don't think she knows much about the situation, but I think everything else she said was accurate. The whole point that you can tell these people is you need to not do these things. It's not about what you need to do. It's about what you don't need to do. Stop interfering in these countries that you have nothing to do with. Let the people of these countries solve their own problems, because there has not been a single incident where the United States has interfered or the country is better off. I'm still asking that question. I'm waiting for somebody to give me literally some sort of example where the United States interfered and the people were better off after the fact.
Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq, Iran.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Syria. Right?
It goes on.
It goes on and on and on. Ukraine, and now fighting to the last Ukrainian.
Right.
Right. So coming back to the Ukraine, to the proxy war that the US and NATO is fighting against Russia via Ukraine, what is your, I mean, every day it changes for me. Like yesterday, I thought, okay, maybe there's going to be this movement towards peace. And then I wake up to the news that Biden's sending 3,000 troops, that NATO's getting, France has made the agreement to train F-16 pilots, although that takes months. So I don't know if they're just kind of leading them along with that or if they really are serious. But once this conflict goes to the air, it's World War III. And we're already in World War III, but that's a hot war, right?
Yeah.
If it goes to the air. So what are your thoughts about where we're going when you heard the 3,000 troops going? I mean, they're only reservists, you know, in other words, the people that are going are people that volunteered, right, for military service, and they're only in the reserves. But 3,000 is a significant number. There's going to be more. It's just that the US they have a shortage in the military. But what is your thought on this? Because NATO's sending much more. They're sending more, like a couple 100,000.
Yeah, I
Boots on the
mean,
ground.
I think Russia is going to do everything in their power to keep this from escalating.
Okay.
I think Russians as a whole, especially in the government, are extremely diplomatic people.
Yeah.
And they have shown it time and time again, almost to a fault. I really, and I say this every time, like there are, and I talk about this with our colleague Dawn Porter. We sat there and we said, we are far more anti-West than anybody at RT.
Yeah,
like literally.
That's true.
And we're Americans.
That's true. Me too.
Because we know, we know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And people think that everybody at RT sits there hating on the United States. It's literally not that at all. Yeah, it's almost like we're the most radical ones. And so the reality is that I think the Russians are going to do everything they can to stop this conflict. However, this is an existential fight for Russia, just like it is an existential fight for NATO. If Russia seizes on this, they know that they will stop being Russia. And I don't think the people of Russia as a whole are going to allow that. People want peace, but they also want their national sovereignty.
They want their sovereignty. They want what we want, which is economic stability, peace, and prosperity, health, education for our children. I mean, peace is primary. Now, I was really upset about Finland because Finland shares a 1,000-mile border with Russia. So what does this mean by Finland being now part of NATO? And is that good or bad? Because Finland, is there ever a chance that Finland could be an ally of Russia? Is there ever a chance that this could actually lead to peace, or will this lead to war?
No, the Finnish have made their choice as allies to NATO, and they have even going back years and years, they have made their choice even during the Second World War, where they were supporting fascist elements of fascist Germany. And that's a reality. That's the truth. And I saw that when I was going through Finland, because I did also go through Finland.
Oh, did you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was questioned in Finland as well because of the whole Russia thing. So this is just the comments that they make, the things they say. It's all part of the.
What is the animosity? What is the crux of that culturally, do you think? Is it just that they are a vassal of the United States now? They're a vassal of the British Empire and the United States Empire? Is that what it is?
I think it goes back further. I mean, I do think that there has been this animosity towards Russia for a long time, coming from the Soviet Union and trying to portray Russians as less than. Like, if you want to
not quite European,
not
quite
quite
that's
European,
snobby.
I mean, Russia is a huge country. You have Western Russia, which is where we are right now. But then you have the central Russia, and then you have the Far East. I mean, it's a huge country. There's so many ethnicities.
It's a continent.
But there's so many ethnicities as well, like in Russia itself. People don't even realize, like, there are like
And 11
Asian
time
looking
zones.
Russians.
Yeah.
There's complete people that not everybody in Russia looks like, blonde, like what some people think. And in fact, more Russians look completely different than that. And so there is this element, and when you see the Ukro-Nazis like making fun of Russians, they go to those elements and they do this caricatures of Russians, and that sort of culture has been embedded in some people to think that they're less than. And that's the same mentality that I've seen in Latin America as well, the self-hating type of thing, because there are people like that think that they would be better if they were more Western, and they don't realize how beautiful this country is and what they would lose if they were Westernized. Right. And this is one of the things that, makes me really sad, because it's something I see all over the countries that have, in some way been interfered with by the West. But there has been this sort of reemergence of pride in Russia because of this conflict. And you have seen people really see Russia for what it is, a lot on the Eastern side, in Asia, in India, in the Arab world, and in Africa. And so you're seeing this sort of people understand and put their faith in Russia, not just for Russia, is this an existential war, but for the entire world that is not Europe and the United States and the Five Eyes. Because what we're seeing here is Pan-Africanism come to fruition. We're seeing Pan-Arabism come to fruition. We're seeing Asia take leadership on the economic sector. And diplomatically as well. Yeah, I mean, the president of Iran has been making his rounds throughout Africa. Sergei Lavrov was in Taipei. He's going to Phuket. And so this is what's happening. That is what we're talking about in terms of
and they're dumping the dollar everywhere they go.
Yeah, and Latin America included is looking for ways to dump the dollar. Ditch the dollar.
Yeah, because they don't want sanctions, and so the sanctions are backfiring as a diplomatic. It's not a diplomatic tool. It's a punishment, and it's a war crime. Yeah, because it ends up hurting the working class. Hey, Reef, I heard you pop in there. You got some questions or comments for Fee? Okay.
Oh, if I had any work in journalism, like being in Russia, like what kind of work would there be? That sort of.
They didn't watch you on RT apparently.
No, they clearly did it. So it's just interesting. And when I was questioned in the United States, it was basically like, like, how did you start in journalism? What is your belief? Who started this war? That sort of thing. Like, and so I was some would say that, that the United States started this war by expanding, trying to get my opinion of this whole thing, right? And so I was very political in my answer. Well, some would agree with that, something like that. Like, and so it's those questions to try to get a perspective that says the United States is wrong, blah, 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 blah. Like, and so, it's this whole idea that you really should know who you're talking to when you talk to about these things. Because, they can take something you say out of context that says, you're supporting Russia in some way. And that's already been done, right? With the Uhuru group saying that they're Russian agents. And
now they're facing 10 years in prison,
which is insane to me. Insane that that's happening.
For sowing discord. Yeah, that was in the indictment. And then, of course, you saw Kirby talk about me, about my case. And they have their opinions about, and then a former CIA officer said he was viscerally angry with my views of the United States talking about inflation as if it doesn't exist, and lack of housing and homelessness and poverty. He made it sound like I just made this stuff up.
Right. Well,
so wow. Okay.
They would have, the Biden administration would have you think that everything is fine.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying, right? But you can ask anybody from the United States if everything is fine, because it's clearly not. It's clearly not. It's hanging by a thread, I think. And a lot of people are in denial. That doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that it's fine. And I can tell you that I have friends who had better jobs before that have been, laid off or have face some sort of difficulty in the United States because of this economy that's just not doing well. there's countless videos of LA, even Russians are starting to watch it, of like what's going on in LA. I mean,
Yeah.
LA went from a place where
Yeah.
exactly. That's
Yeah.
from a place where everybody wanted to live to a place where literally everybody's trying to get out of. And like, I mean, before I left LA, we had our house broken into and my car broken into. It was just really bad. And I can't even blame, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, these people, because it all happened after the pandemic. And that's the thing. The American people were left behind after the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they never bounced back. The economy never bounced back after that. It hasn't. $1,200 in all that time was not going to get, or I'm sorry, $1,600. I think if you were lucky, was never going to help people out. Okay, like that's not even a rent there.
No.
And so it's just that really, I couldn't be angry at people almost, because it's like, when you push society to that point, they're going to steal, they're going to go and commit crimes. That's what happens in society. They're desperate. And you start seeing people at their worst, because then they feel trapped and they have like,
that's so interesting you said that, because I am noticing in Moscow, among the people that, are Russian citizens, there's a calmness. I know here I am in this big major city, but there's a quietness to the city. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's traffic, there's noise, there's, you can hear it out my
People
window, but
aren't like freaking out.
No, you don't have like
You
a lot
would
of
think
drug.
if this
People,
was happening to us, and Americans would be like running out, hoarding everything, and like that's what would be happening. But that
Russians are very calm.
They're very calm.
and but what I noticed as a whole, though, there's a healthier society. There's not a lot of drug use that I've seen. I'm sure there is,
because
I'm sure it exists.
They're pretty strict on that.
They're really strict on
They're
it.
pretty strict on it.
and you, like when I went to Gorky Park and I put up the film, people were like, our parks don't look like this. No, they don't look like that. You don't see families walking calmly around. One thing that struck me, I didn't tell you this, but it really struck me.
People walk in the United States.
Yeah, well, walking, yeah. But no, there was this group of teenagers, right? They were like 15, 16, 14, right? And, immediately when I look at teenagers, I'm like wondering what they're up to. They were up in this gazebo and there was a piano and they were playing this classical piece. And then a couple of them had other instruments and they were literally picking out different classical pieces. And I'm like, oh my God, teenagers in Russia are so different. And then I saw some other teenagers and they were giggling and laughing and walking around and doing what teenagers do. But there was just this innocence, and it reminded me of my childhood. And I'm older than you, obviously, but of the 80s. And even though America was doing terrible things in the 80s in foreign affairs, but in the domestic, the middle class still existed.
Yeah.
Homelessness was just starting, but I would walk in a major city and not see homeless, or it would be rare. You'd see like a drunk and that's it.
That's what you see here.
Yeah, that's what you see here.
Maybe
once in a while. I've seen 2 people that looked, pretty disheveled and maybe homeless or drunk, but that's it. And I've been here now almost a couple months. I've traveled around to different parts. And so people always say, well, you've just been to Moscow. No, I've actually been to the Southern Caucasus. I've been to Sochi. I've been to St. Petersburg. I've been to around Moscow. And then Reade is showing the subway. Tell us about the subways.
Oh, so you guys see this?
Yeah.
This is the subway.
This is what it looks like all the time.
If you want to find a pic of the New York subway, you can go ahead and
yeah, and then compare. Yeah, and then just compare.
I'm not saying somebody got mad at me for saying that. I'm sorry. It's the truth.
It would just
I'm
clean
not
it up. Clean the house. America.
It makes me sad that we can't have better public transportation. It really does, but. That my mom was complaining, or was it my dad, that there's a train in where they live and it's like $20. It's something ridiculous like that for a ticket, for a train.
$20
for a train ticket. They're like, it's so expensive. It's pointless to take it. All my friends are like, yeah, there's no point in taking that. And because in Florida, things are so long distance that your Ubers and your Lyfts cost a lot of money, and you have the tolls.
Yeah.
And so it's like you have some toll roads here, but you don't have to use them. And it's only a few if you want to use
rubles,
it. Yeah. And it's so cheap. Like, yeah. I mean, granted, people don't make as much money here, but the things they get are more accessible. You can have a better life on. You can have
a better quality of life on less. Yeah. You can. Like, I went grocery shopping and I was able to, you know, for less than $50, get a week's worth of groceries easily. And like things that I like, and even stuff for Fee because she was coming over. So I got like some snacky stuff. And but like it's just affordable. And so we're not like trying to push, and people listening us, oh, there you go, you're comparing. There's New York, there's Russia. And I'm not kidding. This is how it looks. There's literally these paintings and sculptures. Each one is like a museum, and it kind of has a theme. And, you know, I'm still learning the history of Russia, which is vast and long.
It's very long.
But it is a beautiful, beautiful city. Now, there are things that are expensive, like the Bolshoi. I wanted to go to the Bolshoi because there's a really good opera on, but like the tickets are like what they would be in New York. They're pretty expensive. But there's other things like theater you can go that's affordable, and other things. But yeah, there's some things that, you know, it's a city. It's
Moscow, and I mean, it's not the cheapest city either in general. I mean, it's never been. But I do think like they make it so a lot of people can enjoy things like parks. A lot of people can enjoy outings with family. A lot of people can just, you know, do things that you could do. It really, you said something, it reminded you of your childhood. I do think that Russia is in some ways what we used to be. In terms of to a degree. I mean, maybe what the United States was in like the 60s minus all the terrible crap, like against
the Civil
Black
War.
people.
Yeah, because all
but
that, the racism.
In terms of that, like you can definitely see that there is that, you know, family sense, there's that sense of society and wanting to be a part of it, of this country, and believing in you know, the president. Now, I will say that if there is any discontent, and I say this all the time, it's in the youth, because the youth has a lot more access to social media in the West, and they see these fake images that are pushed out about the United States and how cool it is, and you know, how you can be Taylor Swift and do all the stuff, and it's just not reality, for most people. But they see that, and that's why the youth is always the ones that are targeted. This is why Navalny supporters were all younger. This is why Pussy Riot and Navalny exist, to turn the Russian youth against.
And this is the thing about that. And this is the thing. They don't remember the pillaging of the 90s. They don't remember the West pillaging the former Soviet Union when it fell, and how dire things were in the 90s in Russia. And how when they got proper leadership, when Vladimir Putin became president, he basically, his leadership, along with, you know, his party, they actually created the middle class. So this is back to political theory 101. Okay. Like what happened in France. When you lose the middle class, when you lose the bourgeois, you will have a revolution. When you lose, and in the United States, I don't know, people are pretty lazy about revolutions in the United States, not so much France, but in the United States, we've lost the middle class. And so that's why we're entering a failed state. We've entered crony capitalism. And this is just, you know, and what's happened with Russia is that it's building its middle class, it's building its workforce. To get a master's degree, PhD, it's $5,000 for your degree. My daughter is graduating with her advanced degree. She's in debt almost $100 and some $1,000. That's with me sometimes helping her. That's with her working and paying still over $100,000. And she's less in debt than some of her friends. Okay. This is the reality of the United States versus like Russia, that they do have some, you know, you have to pay some tuition, but nothing like you do in the US. And it's not privatized. And you have access. You can get a PhD if you want. You can get a master's. You have freedom to do that. Whereas now in the US, it's prohibitive. You have to make a decision. Okay, am I going to drive a truck and make more money, or am I going to go into debt and maybe get a PhD in history and maybe get an adjunct job at a university and get paid minimum wage?
When I was in the service industry, I was working with people who had PhDs and masters because they made more money as bartenders and servers than they did than they would do getting a job entry level. So what was the point of this degree that they spent thousands of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars getting, really, if this society, oh, but then you shouldn't have studied that. Well, that's not the point. The point is society should have like
Education
some
should
sort of
be- yeah.
way to like support you in whatever. And that's the goal of society, is to have people to, and now this is where the communist side comes out, to have people supported by a system, and them give into the system. That's what it is.
Well,
It's like it's both. You
don't even have to label a communist or
You don't
socialist or
have to,
Democrat,
but-
because you know what the difference is culturally? It's like, to me, it's like in America, how I was raised and how we were indoctrinated in school, it was about the individual. It was about the individual.
Right.
But in Russia, you're taught it's about the community and it's about the group. So it's not so much a political ideology as almost a cultural thing, where like
it's a
families,
collectivist society versus an individualistic society.
and you find that in Latin American too, like, and particularly when you have a matriarchal society where the abuela, or in Russian, the babushka, is important. And like in America, the grandmother has no status, right? The grandmother goes to the nursing home. That's it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It goes back to the collectivist aspect of being able to, because we've tied individualism to freedom. That's why.
So there you go.
You're taking away my freedom if I don't get to do this. So this whole thing is how we've twisted things in the United States to make us think that, anything that has a collectivist aspect is evil communism, and China's going to come or Russia, or one of them. It's one of the other, depending on which party you're
or North Korea, for example.
North Korea. And so it's like, so this idea of doing things, it's taking away your freedom if in some way or another you're helping somebody else, or you're getting help from somebody as a handout. It's this idea where we've been like maligned to think that this is all, it's all one thing or the other, and it really isn't. I mean, Russia again is a capitalist country at this point.
It is.
I'm not going to tell Russia, that it needs to be something else or different. People here at this point, they're not fighting for communism or against capitalism. They're fighting for the existence of Russia, to be able to have that debate that they've had forever. I mean, the Communist Party is the second largest party in Russia,
and they continue to have, but I like that debate, because you know what, they do have strong social programs. They don't leave anyone behind, like medically, like, okay. And we've talked about this, but like, for instance, I have a prescription for my heart thing that's in the United States. It's $800 a month. I was literally trying to come up with when I didn't have insurance, $800 a month, which is almost half of rent, right? In some places, it's a lot of money to come up with. A lot of money. To pay for 30 days, one pill each day, right? Here in Russia, that same thing is, I said it was about $60, and I looked at the thing, it's actually $60 for 60 days of that same medication, the exact same thing. Why is it cheaper in Russia? I don't know. It's the same company, same medicine. But what I want American citizens to hear is that same company that's selling you that medicine for thousands of dollars a month or whatever, they're selling it over in Europe or Russia for a dime on the dollar.
So why is it the greatest country in the world? What freedom do you have if you don't have the freedom to say what you want to say, if you don't have the freedom to spend your money because you're spending it all on either rent or on food, or you can't afford your medication, so you get sick and you get worse, and then you have bigger health problems, and it just adds up. It's like a snowball effect. It just adds up, and so like, you really don't have freedom. You have this illusion of freedom, and I think that's where the point things are getting in the United States, sadly. And I don't think everybody can move and go somewhere else. That's not that's not a viable solution. What is a viable solution is that the American public takes the government back from the people that stole it. That's literally it. That's the only, and it's not a radical thing to say. It's the only solution, really. At the end of the day, if the United States is what it was established to be, a country of people who are patriots, who support the United States in what is intended to be, well, make it what it was intended to be, not what it is now. And the only people that can do that are the American people. Exactly, because right now it's a mafia state. It's become a mafia state under the Biden regime, and it already was, but now it's worse. And we've lost constitutional right of freedom of speech and other freedoms of expression. And I am an example of that. I was supposed to testify before Congress, and I'm here in Russia because I wasn't safe in my own country and wasn't allowed, and intimidated and hounded and chased
And now I'm here, I'm doing fine, but I should be able to testify before Congress against Joe Biden. And you should be able to, as an American citizen, hear my testimony and all the other whistleblowers that want to step forward that are hiding. So, but thank you so much, Fee, for coming. Hey, I want to thank Reef because he's so awesome. Thanks for pulling up all the articles. INN, Indie News Network, and Indie. I love our whole family of extended family, Revolutionary Black Network, and Stabby Sabs, and Misty, and everyone. And then, of course, our talented Jessie Jett, who did the theme song and did the song that you heard between the lines, read between the lines at the beginning. So big shout out to you guys. I miss all of you so much. And, you know, I'm really glad that you showed up. And thanks for all the listeners and for all the comments. I've been getting a lot of comments on my YouTube and things like that, and a lot of followers, and I really appreciate your support. So keep supporting independent podcasts. And then Fee, how can we find you and where do we find you on a daily basis?
Well,
you're all over the place.
You can find me at RT. Literally, I live there apparently. So you can find me there. I'll be there for the next 2 days. And then I'll be heading to Nicaragua with pasta. You can also find me on the Convo Couch, YouTube. You can find me on Twitter more than anything. Fiorella Isabel M on Twitter, and on Telegram. Fiorella in Moscow is the Telegram channel name now. So yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, safe travels. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Next week, we have Lee Camp. Love you. See you next week.